and welcome to Framing Pictures. We are here at Scarecrow Video, and we thank Scarecrow Video for hosting us here, and thanks also to the Seattle channel for taking pictures of us while we talk. And we'll be
going to go through the list of the festival sponsors, are you?
Yes, I am going to go through the. I'd like to thank Rockstar Recover. It's one of those awful things that you drink. We have an evening of talking about movies, and we'll introduce ourselves briefly before we get started. I'm Robert Horton.
Bruce Reid.
Kathleen Murphy.
Richard Jameson.
And we have a full slate, I think. We're going to talk about some films that are out in current distribution, as we like to say, and various kinds of distribution, actually, different sorts. And then we will also talk about, as we do sometimes, we're going to settle on one of the great directors, and we have an excuse to talk about one of the Pantheon directors because of a DVD release. But I think that'll be a fruitful conversation. But first, we're going to look at these films that are currently out. They all begin with the letter B. We will go in alphabetical order. Nevertheless, I like to be strict about these things. Not going to take any arguments from you people. And the letter is B, and the first film is Baby Driver, a new film by the director Edgar Wright that has met with a great success critically and has been warmly received for a film that is a non-blockbuster at the box office as well. And I believe Bruce and I are the only people who have seen this film thus far. So we will take care of it quickly, perhaps. What do you think, Bruce? This is a film that, as people may not know, is about a driver who is named Baby.
Yes.
You could think the title meant a whole lot of different things, including the fact that it's taken from a Simon and Garfunkel song, but it is literally about a driver named Baby.
Yes.
Take it away from that.
I would say that for anyone who sees the trailer they've just shown, this is one of those movies that it's clear no one at the studio quite knew what they had because it had like 8 different trailers. And this one is probably responsible for its success, and it is far and away the worst of the bunch.
Okay,
because
how so?
The trailer that you will see at the prologue of this makes it look like it's a witty crime heist with perhaps some fun dialogue and maybe doesn't take things too seriously and lots of violence, and that's all true. The great little secret about this movie is that it's how Edgar Wright was able to finance making a musical. And I'm not even tongue-in-cheek about this. When you see this, everything is done to a beat. Everything. The way people pick up a coffee cup, the way people slam a door, the way people walk down the street is all orchestrated to whatever music is playing in his head at the time, including the shootouts. This is one of those films.
The driver.
Yeah, he's always playing music. He's always
because
playing.
he had an accident and something is wrong with his head. Am I correct?
It's tinnitus, and you can't actually drown out tinnitus with the music, but what the hell? It makes for a cute setup.
It helps.
Yeah. And but I can say without exaggeration, I think, from my perspective, that the opening dance number of this movie, which is him waiting for a heist and sitting in the car listening to a song, and then he starts dancing to the song in the car seat, is probably the best musical number I've seen staged in several years. And
How many have you seen? It's
know,
not like they're very common.
No, but there's always been this like, it's like the way the Western keeps popping up because people grew up on Westerns and like now they get some money, I want to make a Western. Musicals, same thing. Not just Damien Chazelle.
Sam Peckinpah made a musical.
Yeah.
Cable Hogue.
There you go. Which was a Western. So
exactly.
It all works. But yeah, and the exuberance of this construction overrides any flaws it has, which I think there are some, which are problems I've always had with Edgar Wright, even though I admire him and have enjoyed all his films. Things I didn't like about his previous films are still affecting this one, but I think this might be his most fun movie just in terms of moment-to-moment color, pleasure, music, dance, sound, everything about it. Even he even borrows the Scorsese trick of when there's a shootout to the song, the shotgun blasts are synced to the song, in a way that punctuates. It's just tremendous fun. If there's a point, it's I don't know, choose love over bank robbery. That's not bad, but
No, I come down firmly on the side of that argument. I think we
Wouldn't it
really
be better
should.
to have both?
As in gun crazy or something like that? Yeah.
Well, no.
you do get that with a secondary couple, actually. But
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what is one of the problems with Edgar Wright? I'd like to hear what one of the limitations that you are talking about.
he's always had this ability.
This is the director of Shaun of the Dead and
Hot Fuzz.
it's very enjoyable films.
Yes, and they all are wonderful. He's always had this tendency. He's very good at critiquing a very sort of masculine sense of escape and fantasy, and then he always just indulges it by the end. So you're simultaneously watching these characters. You're like, oh, I see, they have to grow up, but then the point will ultimately be like, well, they don't really have to grow up. And
Okay.
this one is better about that than some others, but even
Yeah,
here, it's
Definitely. Well, it's a fun movie. Is it was it Michael Powell who would shoot things to a pre-recorded soundtrack?
Oh,
Is that-
Leone did. Powell makes
I'm thinking
sense.
Powell specifically. Didn't he do a couple of things? Red Shoes, obviously, but Black Narcissus too. Was there some sequence that?
It was supposed to be opera,
Yeah.
okay.
And he
conceptually.
had the music already and staged and cut it. And Wright is doing a less exalted version of that here, but it's the same. As Bruce was saying, you take the same kind of pleasure in realizing the gunshots are right on the beat of this song. That's outrageous. And it's funny and.
It seems to
fun.
have a great many, or not a great many, but a number of interesting actors in it. Do they perform well, or are they just window dressing?
Spacey is Spacey. I wouldn't say there's anything surprising about his performance, but by the same token, it's right up his-
Competent.
Yeah.
John Hamm?
For my money, it didn't get enough comedy for Hamm. I think that's actually his best métier.
Yes.
And here he's funny, but he's not an inherently funny performance. So he's very good. There's not a bad performance in it. The female ingenue, which is another problem I would have with Wright's films, is also fine, considering what you basically saw her do there. Wait on the phone and say, yes, I'll run away with you. That's pretty much all she does in the movie.
Well, her first scene of meeting cute is very nimbly handled. I found the casting to be a little right on the nose. Like, oh, Kevin Spacey would be the first person you'd think for that role. He's done it a dozen times
A
or so.
usual
Maybe
suspect kind of
it would be
person.
nice to see maybe somebody else take a swing at that. Same with Jamie Foxx, actually.
Yeah.
Some people, I was reading, some people thought that Ansel Elgort, the young man who plays the lead, was a little soft in the role. As a criticism, but it seems to me that he's supposed to be.
He should be, yeah.
Yeah, that's the character as written. So I didn't have a particular problem with that. And he's very funny when he's dancing to his headphones, sort of oblivious to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
All right, we can come back to that later if anybody wants to. But
Or if anybody has anything.
well, we'll catch up with this.
All right.
We're just rolling along here, because the next one in the alphabetical order is The Bad Batch, a film that has played briefly in Seattle, but is accessible on demand and all the other ways that people can watch movies now, and is a film by the director of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Okay. A very interesting debut feature from a couple of years ago. Kathleen, you want to start us off with this film and just say what it is?
Well, this is a post-apocalyptic movie, and during this particular time, those who are considered to be part of a bad batch, that is, criminals or unpleasant people of any ilk, are pretty much just cast out into the desert. There's a wall, and the police just throw them out into the desert. And one of the people that we are going to follow is a young woman played by Suki Waterhouse, who is cast out into the desert in short shorts and a T-shirt and a hamburger. I think they give her a
give you a McDonald's burger and a Coke.
and a Coke. Yes.
We want to be humane about this after all.
Yes.
We don't just send somebody into the desert. The desert used to be part of the United States, but it has officially been separated off legally in every which way.
But we don't know who built the wall or who paid for it.
Who paid for it, yeah.
But at any rate, she sets off into the desert with a fair amount of insouciance, I mean, more so than you would think. And she begins to have adventures out in the desert, in the wasteland, and so on. A.O. Scott said that this is a combination, if I remember correctly, I shared this with you, Robert, a combination of Mad Max, Kill Bill, and Bud Boetticher westerns of the 50s. And I would add A Boy and His Dog, for those of you who remember one of my favorite films. And
Punishment Park in there too. But.
Yes, precisely. This is a film with, let's see, cannibalism. Very quickly, our heroine loses body parts when captured by some bodybuilders who are busy tanning themselves in the desert among a cluster of wrecks. And these folk live on the flesh of other human beings. And it's rather, this is not done with any big exploitation, gore, or anything of that sort. It's just perfunctory. I mean, you got to get your food somewhere. And she's caught and available, and so she's butchered. And one of the people living in this camp is Jason Momoa, who doesn't really have to bodybuild, but there he is. And he has a little daughter whom he adores, and we see him with her, and it's clear that they have a human relationship. We haven't seen any of those in this dystopian landscape. And eventually her adventures, her journey, and this is really a pilgrim's progress, I think, continues onward. She encounters a salvage man, and in the context of what I'm trying to communicate about this movie, let's capitalize the S, a salvage man, because he seems to salvage everything from the wasteland, including human beings. He pops up to move the narrative along. And I'm not going to tell you who he is, because who plays him, because you will be delighted once you see through the dirt and the makeup and so on to find out who's underneath there. Doing quite a good job. And she's moved on to a settlement called Comfort. And when I say Pilgrim's Progress, I'm not just using that as a kind of simile or shallow allusion. I mean for you to understand that this is a pilgrim's progress through the wasteland, that she's on the track of something. Someone asks her what she wants. I think that was in the trailer. She wants to be the solution to something. And here's this not spectacularly bright or strong young woman in the middle of this dead world filled with freaks and maniacs and cannibals, without an arm, without a leg, and yet somehow there's some spark of decency in her. It's buried, but it's there. And in Comfort, she meets Keanu Reeves, of course. And he's kind of a mixture of Timothy Leary and maybe the head of the Manson family. and he's having a very good time. He's very good.
A little bit of explicitly Jim Jones,
Oh,
I
yes,
think,
of
with
course.
the sunglasses
Yes,
and
you're
the,
right.
the
You're right.
speeches.
All right, let's
yeah.
throw him into the mix
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
The Branch Davidians. You're right.
Yeah,
He's
right.
surrounded by young women in various stages of pregnancy and so on. But in a pinch, they will pull out machine guns to defend the community. And he keeps everybody dancing, everybody in comfort dancing, and pretty much drugged up. And you got to sort of see that as, you know, what a savior might do in this particular world. Dance and do drugs. Why not? But our girl isn't having any. And by a series of events, which you will have to go to the movie to see, she manages to put together something like a family, a genuine family, a genuine community of human beings with fellow feeling in the middle of this empty, sterile landscape full of butchers and exploiters and other assorted bad people. And it's not a movie that's full of melodrama, and you would expect it to be in certain ways. It's very steady paced. It's a real road movie. I'm very partial to road movies, and I'm particularly partial when the pilgrim is a young woman who isn't putting on airs. I'm not a feminist superhero, pace Wonder Woman. I am just an ordinary person who's kind of, you know, not a terrific, a saint, but I am a human being. And that matters in a world where those are few and far between. I liked it very much. It had the same kind of steadiness and focus that her first film had. And this young woman whose name...
Anna Lily Amirpour.
You got to keep your eye on her. If she keeps going, she's going to be really great, I think, as a director.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with the final assessment. I think this one had more elements that didn't work than Girl Who Walks Home at Night.
Name one.
Giovanni Ribisi.
Well, I didn't think he was supposed to work particularly. I mean, he's sort of background.
He's sort of archly symbolic.
Of what?
You want to help him solve his puzzle?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know.
But I didn't think he was particularly being focused on. I mean, he was just there.
He is somehow italicized, but then not really given much
But
to
not
do.
doing anything to do. That's true.
No,
Yeah.
but I thought he was italicized as Giovanni Ribisi being another freak in the movie. I didn't think that he was being given very much to do.
Yeah.
No, it isn't his fault by any
No,
means.
No.
I wouldn't
But it
say
is
that.
something that I felt as the film played along, as it was nearing an end, and I got a glimpse of it at one point. I said, oh yeah, he really never really came into it that much
No, he did not.
after the setup.
Yeah. But you know, so I have some problems here and there. But the overarching.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Bruce, let me go back because I want to
Okay.
understand you on this one. You're saying that a flaw with the film is a character like Ribisi. Is that correct?
I'm
Or-
saying a flaw in the film is what Ribisi is clearly meant to be,
Uh-huh.
not the character. The character is, you know, on a page. There's an archness to. There's some symbology in this film that is really rich and smart and clever, and there's some that's just arch. There's some that's like, you know, you would cross out of a first draft.
Okay, I don't think Ribisi is particularly a focal point in the movie. So
He's
what?
not.
Okay, so that I would not find his archness a major flaw of the film.
I never said major.
He just started to list shortcomings, and that happened to be the first one.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying not a major flaw. So I would like to hear a major flaw.
I never said there were a major flaw. I said there were flaws.
Okay, well, let's try for another flaw then. I feel like we're in a Jesuitical debate. At any rate, go ahead.
We are.
I think that there's as I say, there's a really fine. I like the film.
No, I understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm making a distinction between
Yeah.
minor and major flaw, or if there are no major flaws, what's another minor flaw?
I think the film. It's never dull. It is 2 hours, and that's a little bit on the edge for me for, you know, a post-apocalyptic journey. Well, it's actually not post-apocalyptic. We don't know what state America's in. As far as we know, they're fine.
Well, I always wonder what state America was in.
Yeah.
But we're never told what's on the other side of the wall.
Right. You know, and I don't. It's one of those moments where it's like, okay, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to say like, get rid of that scene, get rid of this scene. But there was a stretch where I was like, okay, we're still in the desert. Okay.
Okay, so you found it too long, and that was a flaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, there are things that are done that are so smart that some of the other ones just kind of grated on me.
Mm-hmm.
As you say, those disciples of Reid's, that's one of the most marvelous things ever, because they have there's a bunch of sloganeering in Comfort. First off, it's called Comfort, which that's fine, and it looks great because they've built their own wall out of a bunch of transport carriers, and so there's like this big multicolored wall in the middle of the desert that you enter through. It looks great, and when you're there are signs everywhere about like, you know, this is not real, live the dream. And that's all. It goes back to the drugs and the dance and everything like that. All of those were like, okay, that's fine. I like that. Then she nails it home because these pregnant warriors, by the way, they don't just archly pick up machine guns. They are always toting machine guns. They are simultaneously his bodyguard, his harem, his everything. They have this blissfully drugged out face because they're like, you know, they've been selected by the master, obviously, to do this thing. They're wearing T-shirts that say "The dream is inside me." That was fantastic. You know, that's the kind of thing that made some of these other ones look a little, you know, on the nose, shall we say, because it was just so nightmarishly accepting of them. You know, these are not women in revolt. They are just blissfully along for this wonderful glory they've been given to carry these things to term. There's and some of these things that are on the nose, and she's one of these filmmakers, she knows she's on the nose. You know.
She's a very educated filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, even for the, like, you know, as you say, she has this whole journey and she loses an arm and a leg. And towards the end of the film, Keanu Reeves says to her, it's like, to get here, you had to lose an arm and a leg. So she knows exactly what's up with all of these, you know, genre moments and cross references and everything. And you know, by the way, when you're rattling off the influence, this has got to be the only post-apocalyptic cannibal action film you will ever see with like a Born in Flames poster on a wall. So again, she's cognizant of all this stuff. No, I do enjoy it. I love the scavenger, as you say. I love the fact that there's a key moment between the scavenger and Momoa where he actually winds up having the little item on his cart that's exactly what Momoa needs, although he doesn't realize it. But it's still not given. This is still a world of trade and impact. He takes something back for it without even asking. All of these dynamics. It is a good film. Like I said, I do think that there were parts that there were parts that were taking me out of it because they were too framed and knowing and winking. But those were some moments along the way. I do enjoy the film.
I think I know what you mean when you say that. Yeah, I actually like the film more than her first film, which was widely acclaimed, and this film, not so much. This film has gotten some bad reviews,
kind of
and as though people weren't. It was fine that she was this Iranian American filmmaker who did this arty little horror movie, but when she goes big with something that is, I think, making all these film references and otherwise, somehow that was not allowed or something. But one thing that struck me is that with all of the stuff that's coming at you and these ideas and this sense of a filmmaker who's almost too smart in terms of laying all this stuff out there, she also goes along and during this story and goes against some of the genre stuff and the expectations. And there's a particular moment, and I won't give it away, but Kathleen, you were describing someone that we do come to root for, and yet in the first third of the film, she does something that's terrible. She something awful. It's crime and it's wrong too.
And just to explain, I'll keep it as well. But for what you're saying, something that actually, in terms of genre, makes total sense. Like if this were just another post-apocalyptic cannibal survival movie, it's like, of course, that's what you would do.
Yeah, although
but it's made awkward and painful and wrong, as you say.
Yeah, but except that I've almost felt like one of the things she was doing is that every movie that gets made, the people who give you money look at the script and they say the main character needs to be more likable because this particular thing will make her not likable, and it certainly muddies the waters in this film quite a bit, and yet. I felt like the moment was being brandished almost as though to say, we're not gonna make this easy for you. Yeah. This is the wasteland here, and this is what would happen. Yeah. And now you will go on from there.
And the thing is, if you have a Pilgrim's Progress, the premise is that you have a sinner, and she is. That's what I meant when I said she is a bad batch. She's a bad person, but. There is some kind of basic need for creature comfort, for communal connection in her that makes her save some other people, even in the process of her own salvation. Let's see, how can I put this? This could be called A Girl and Her Rabbit as well. And what happens to the rabbit in this particular story, even at the moment of peak decency, human decency, stays true to the fact that this is a bad world. This is a make or break world where you really have to do a lot of unpleasant things to stay alive. That realization in that particular moment is both blackly ironic and just plain sort of stomach turning, but there it is, because this is a very fallen world, and there isn't any let up to that at all, except perhaps the salvage man. You remember the gyro man in Mad Max, who comes out of the sky like a saving angel? Every time this particular character appeared, I kept thinking of the gyro man and that wonderful shot in Mad Max of Max's broken body being carried aloft, and the camera looks down, and it's really a very funny moment of a kind of Christ-like ascendance. And there's some of that kind of edged humor in this movie too.
And the one of the really interesting things about this, as you say, is that again so we have the wildness, we have the cannibals, we have comfort. Oh, but there's problems in comfort as well. And so we've seen, a bunch of traumas, and we're like, oh, okay, I see how this is going to play out. And it doesn't do that either. So that was actually really interesting as well. Everything is everything is in place for a much more conventional way out of things. And then it's not even jumped away from. It's just literally the pieces don't lead down the trail is not taken. It just goes.
Well, that's part of what Robert's saying, that she's too bright for her own good, because she explodes conventions and she blows up a lot of genre expectations.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about that. She's almost too smart. I'm not quite sure I understand entirely what you mean by that.
I don't know.
I
I
mean-
think it goes back to maybe the sense of archness that Bruce was alluding to. But I don't have much of a problem with it, because it's a genre movie that is, you know, writ large, and yeah, that's okay with me.
No, I don't in any way want to imply that you have to like the movie. I mean, I think both you and Bruce are hearing that. What I'm curious about is, in the context of how few women are able to make interesting movies, although there are a lot of women being touted because they're women, and therefore making a movie must be applauded, whether it's any good or not. Here's a really bright woman who is making an interesting movie. And I guess one of the things that I'm reacting to is the kind of expectations that are being laid on the film, or suggesting that maybe she's too smart, that there's archness and so on. I'm not particularly even talking about you and Robert, but the sense that we can't have that. That's not a good thing. Whereas, you know, Ava DuVernay can make something like, what's her? Selma. And we talk about it seriously, as though, you know, this was a terrifically intelligent and well-made film. Whereas I do not see it. I think, you know, that...
I would actually, the closest analogy I would get to what I'm saying, I think what Robert's saying, and I think it fulfills for like potential for the future for her as well. In other words, take this as both what we're talking about and a compliment, would be that reaction to Quentin Tarantino for those first couple films, including Pulp Fiction, where it was like, yeah, this guy is clearly talented, but what's really up with him, and what's it? And as the career progressed, some people were late to the game and realized, oh no, this is actually a very, you know, thoughtful and talented guy. Maybe that's it. Maybe that her world is so distinctive that, you know, we still don't have the footholds in place to actually.
I think that's an awfully good point. And particularly since an awful lot of those people are still saying the same things about Tarantino that they were in the beginning. It becomes boring after a while. But and I'm also talking gender politics / criticism. That it's odd to me that so few expectations are often laid on films directed by women, and then here comes this one, and a lot of heavy expectations are laid on this one.
Well, I think
and I'm curious about that, particularly since, you know, it has pretty much just disappeared. It's.
I mean, if you want to just use that example you just gave, there are different expectations for different kinds. I do not think that the talk about DuVernay was necessarily, the expectation was not about the talent perceived, it was about the representation that had been denied. It was about, and you know, yes, we can roll our eyes and say who cares critically. That's what that conversation was about with DuVernay. The conversation was about a black woman told the story that had been being told by white guys all this time, in terms of cinema and books and all the rest of it. And you know, with Amirpour, you know, I mean, her name is this perfectly schizoid embodiment of what we're dealing with here, because she's, you know, an American Iranian, as you say. She's, you know, Anna Lily Amirpour. You know, there's already this notion of two things, so she can completely understand. She had a bit of a silly controversy a while ago because she dressed up as a rapper for Halloween once, and there were literally people going about, you know, because it takes nothing to get people pissed off these days. You know, it's like, oh my God, she's in blackface. As she pointed out, she didn't actually engage in any blackface. She's brown. she did her hair. She put the clothes on to look like Wheezy, but you know, she didn't change. She didn't apply makeup, anything. And the notion that people had of being offended by this was something. She's like, so she's already navigating 5 or 6 layers beyond what any of us are dealing with. You know, because it's not just she's a brown person in America. She's a brown Iranian in modern America. She's a brown woman in modern America. I'm not going to get into this because it is her own person. If you see a picture of her, she's got body issues as well. She doesn't. As far as I know, she's totally fine with it. She is not a conventionally attractive woman. More power to her. Good on her. But that's something else that she's got to navigate in this world. You know.
I want to talk just about the film, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still trying to talk about why such heavy expectations of this particular film vis-a-vis other films that we see, such as Selma. And maybe this isn't fruitful, but it may be a way to get us into The Beguiled, because I see a lot of the same problems in objective criticism happening in what I've read about The Beguiled, Sofia Coppola's Beguiled.
Before we get into the Beguiled, I was afraid this was going to happen. I just want to make a comment about this movie before we leave it to this. Nothing to do with chick flicks or anything. This is a terrific looking movie. This movie is in widescreen, I mean CinemaScope type widescreen. And that format, that shape has become commonplace in the last, 10 or 20 years. Which used to be the occasion for something pictorially, if not visually, spectacular, like Roman armies, Western landscape, whatever. And now that shape is just being used for just any movie that you happen to be shooting. And that's a little surprising. I mean, it's entirely appropriate that, you know, any kind of movie can be in CinemaScope. Sometimes very intimate films are beautifully handled that way. Truffaut, Jules and Jim, Nicholas Ray's film Bigger Than Life. Marvelous things can happen in the normal world seen through a CinemaScope shape. But people using this shape all the time in movies anymore, and it hardly ever really matters, really makes any difference. Just, I suppose, it was easier for the actors not to worry about, am I going out of shot here? Because there's more space to be in it. But very little sense of compositional or even dramatic purpose in using that frame. There's not a shot in this movie that isn't like, holy, she really knows how to put a CinemaScope frame around action or around emptiness, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
And just like that to be part of the discussion.
Well, I like that to be part of the discussion too, since it was very much part of what I was trying to say.
Okay.
And I do want to head off the dismissive chick flick, which you may find amusing, but I don't in this context.
Yes, I was confident you wouldn't. I mean...
Can I finish what I was going to
go
say? Part of what I like about this director is her ability to navigate space, to frame space. That's part of what I consider a Pilgrim's Progress, not just plot turn, not a plot turn of phrase. And it's part of what I was trying to get at when I was talking about the business of her being too smart. Because there is a sense in which here is this marvelously conceived film, visually, and I think in terms of treading the landmines of simply being derivative and so on. And you know, I hear people talk about it as though it's a minor event, a very minor kind of film, in comparison to rather more bloated versions of filmmaking by people of color or what have you, however many colors or ethnic groups she belongs to. I don't really care. But I am seeing a lot of film criticism getting boiled down, reduced to a kind of gender war situation, and rather than objective film criticism.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And there's a lot of cheerleading going on in recent months for. I enjoyed Wonder Woman too, but clearly there was a great deal of cheerleading going on because it was a big film directed by a woman, and that's fantastic. Two things that I can think of.
It's not a great film, and I think we need to say that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking about. Was saying she's almost too smart for this movie. I think I'm also thinking of a film that we talked about here a few months ago, which also happened to be directed by a woman, which was also about cannibalism. But hey, that's just totally a coincidence. And if
Raw.
Which I also made that point, and for me, I think I was saying the film was a little academic. It was so smart that a few of the things perhaps did not entirely come to life. I don't think that's as true of this film. I'm just picking up on a little bit of what Bruce said, and I think there is that around the edges. Maybe she is not too smart for the film. I'm dreading that somebody at The Stranger is going to hear that and start saying it's a war on women or something. And the other thing,
she should know her place.
Great. Bruce used to write for The Stranger.
I think she does, Bruce.
She very confidently knows her place. Yes, that is for sure. You're asking because I just saw the film today, and I had read headlines and tweets and things from its I think generally disappointed reception at film festivals and so on. Although it won a prize at Venice or something like that.
But The Beguiled, for heaven's sakes, won the...
And The Beguiled won Best Director. I wonder if is the film, was there the expectation from the right kind of critic that she should be doing something more important than this? That this is beneath our leading Iranian American female filmmaker, for God's sakes. You should be talking about making something on the immigration crisis. Which maybe this movie is about a little bit about the immigration crisis.
Very much so.
But that this is not appropriate, and so therefore we're not going to get on board with this one.
Well, that's what they said to Tarantino too. Come on, get serious. We see you have talent. Let's see you apply it to something important.
And still do say that. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, The Beguiled is a natural next place for us to land.
Another chick flick.
A film that, in 1971, it was people didn't say chick flick at that point.
No, they said a hysterical male fantasy of castration.
Yes, a film that existed in that year as a movie directed by Don Siegel with Clint Eastwood. I find it interesting that Eastwood is the person who brought the novel to Siegel and wanted to make it and thought it would be.
And both of them fought for the ending as opposed to the happy ending that the studio and the writer wanted.
In there, yeah. And is now remade by Sofia Coppola. I don't know, Richard, do you want to say anything about the two versions? Anything to say about the Siegel before we sort of watch it?
We watched the Siegel this afternoon, first time in a few decades. And I must say I liked it better than I ever have before. This coming about a week after having seen Coppola's film, I unhesitatingly pronounce that Don Siegel made a lot better movie than Sofia Coppola did in terms of just making moment-to-moment satisfaction and excitement visible, and not a little in the way of a sense of humor. Siegel's film was more recently characterized by somebody as a departure for him into almost art film territory compared to the kind of hardcore genre movie that he was normally making one way or another. And I think that's a valid enough point to make. Siegel thought it was the best movie he ever made or ever would make. I don't think I agree with him about that, but I see what he means. And I do admire the film. The story told in the two movies is very similar. What is immediately apparent sitting down to revisit Siegel after having seen Coppola is that the world of his movie is so dirty and lived in, including the look of the girls' school, this mansion sitting in the middle of a Civil War battlefield, essentially. It's kind of run down, falling apart a little bit. The young ladies who go there are not really so much young ladies as a bunch of girls. They don't have shoes. Their clothes are a little dirty looking and tattered, unlike the world of Coppola's film, which seems to be waiting for a fashion shoot or waiting for whatever photo spread is going to be in the Vanity Fair or whatever smart magazine is covering the latest film by Sofia Coppola. The rhythm of Siegel's film, and Siegel was a guy who started out in the montage department at Warner Brothers. I mean, there's a real beat and movement and nervous energy to his film, whereas Coppola's is suspended in this art film mist, visually and also literally, in terms of the southern atmosphere that is leaned on very heavily visually. And it is a movie that feels more embalmed than alive, whereas The Siegel is a very nervy, desperate kind of movie, and understandable in terms of the treatment of the story that it's told, of a man who, having been wounded in a Civil War battle, almost dies, but is taken in and done for by the ladies of this seminary, which is a little almost world unto itself, as presented in both movies, much more so in the Coppola film, as being another of these detached, privileged zones to which she gravitates and, dare we say, apparently has lived her life in as the daughter of Hollywood royalty. I've never been a big Sofia Coppola fan. I think far and away Lost in Translation is the best thing she's done, and that was quite a few films ago, and more than a decade ago in time. Those are a few things to say. I'd be happy somebody else to get in and talk about these.
Well, there's just like I've never been a huge fan of Coppola. I like Coppola. I think she's made good films. I think this is interesting. It's okay. I agree with you that this haze of isolation never quite works. But there's moments where you realize what could have been. I think because there's, for the first. I'd probably say like 10 minutes or so in the little prologue forest scene, I actually thought that there was like, oh, that's some sort of weird, for all the period detail, they're going for this kind of weird avant-garde percussive score. And then you realize it's actually the battle that's going on, in earshot. Mm-hmm. And that constant kind of thudding is well handled, I think. There's moments like that that are interesting and true. But there's a little too much, this is one of these films that you basically get, as opposed to the Eastwood Siegel film, which even as it's going along, will upset your apple cart about, oh, I've got this film figured out, I know what McBurney's about.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a flashback to the war, and you're like, oh, no, I had no idea what's going on now. This one is, if you read the one-sentence log line, you pretty much know how this film is going to go. And that does sap some of the energy from it.
It doesn't have any energy. No, it's a kind of glass menagerie within, and I double down, within a bell jar. And it has no air. One of the first things watching Siegel's Beguiled today was, my God, there's actual breathable air in this movie. The glass menagerie of the women, now I want you to understand that they all sit around in taffetas and silks continually. There's a wonderful, I think, scene where they're sort of in a circle and their full taffeta silk dresses are contiguous to each other, so they create a kind of mollusk of richness and privilege and something faintly rotten. So they're dressed to the nines always. They seem to have plenty of food, no slaves, because Sophia could not allow the burden of race, the sin of the South, to fall upon these women. I quote. That would have led us astray from the feminism of this film, although I have yet to hear where the feminism is in this film. The mellow candlelight, the endless longueurs, I mean, you just want it to be over. You know where it's going. Poor Colin Farrell was apparently unmanned before he got into the film, because he does not come on as the irresistible, coxcomb, I think they called Eastwood, in the first film. He does not have that dangerous spark that he has had in some of his earlier films, where he actually was a sexual being. He seems to be totally drained, even before he's drained by the ladies. I cannot understand the affection for this film. I honestly cannot. I don't understand the admiration for it. It is a mood piece. It's sort of a little fairy tale. But if Catherine Breillat had made it, she's done a series of dark fairy tales, then it might have been interesting. It might have been an Angela Carter kind of fairy tale. But no, this one's very mild, and you never have a real sense of passion amongst these people. And the only thing I really loved about it, I have to say this, is Coppola had kept shooting, sometimes framing the same scene, of these great curving trees, great maternally shaped trees, in this heavy, honey-drenched light. I'm a sucker for light like that. I love it. And this place seemed, again, the bell jar, honey-drenched, etc., enchanted. Even when the soldiers go by outside, it's in a mist. You hardly see them. There's no context for this story, whereas Siegel started with Matthew Brady kind of stills to give you a sense that there is actually a war out there, not just a war within. Anyway,
Well,
just let me finish this image.
Okay.
It starts out with that lovely light and keeps emphasizing it with the same shot over and over again. And after the great betrayal, I'm not particularly going to say what the great betrayals are, the light goes out, and the light turns a kind of sickly white, almost yellow. And I loved that. I mean, that was brilliant. As though the light had gone out of Eden, as though some kind of fundamental innocence, although I don't know where the innocence was, I will have to take it on faith. I guess you always have to take it on faith. Anyway, gone. And that was a beautiful directorial touch. But
yeah, no, and she's like, I will say, again, I'm not raving about this. I don't think it's that great. She recontextualizes the opening differently. As you say, Siegel uses these Matthew Brady photographs, and you are remembered of a reality. Here, she has a girl humming a song that will be played about 4 times throughout the film, and it is an actual Civil War song. Actually, I think it predates the Civil War, but became popular because it's a song about lost love and separation. And you know, in other words, all I'm saying is this doesn't work. I do think there's an intelligence at work here. I do think that, you know, I think that we have to be careful in saying that this film doesn't work to make clear we're not saying it doesn't work because it doesn't do what Don Siegel did. You know, it's completely legitimate.
No, I think it fails on its own.
Well, I mean that's totally fine. I'm just saying that it is not trying to do what Don Siegel did. So let it fall on its own.
I don't think anyone has asked it to.
Yeah. I mean, I even when I wrote about it, I think that her decision to excise the enslaved woman, who plays a totally fascinating role in the Siegel film.
She's the only grown-up.
Complete. Yeah. Oh, she's the steadiest person in the movie. I mean, in a way, I think that makes Coppola's film much less complex than it could have been, and all that. But at the same time, to go to your point, she has the right to do that.
Sure.
She has an idea. She has a plan. She has a thing that she wants to create, and I can see her rationalizing that decision because she wanted to do this one thing. I didn't find it.
I don't think she's trying in any. That's what I meant when there's no context for this. There's no South. There's no war. It's the bell jar. It's the bell jar in which he always works. This might very well be Versailles by way of Southern Gothic.
Yeah. I was going to, I mean, it could be on a spaceship.
Yes,
really.
exactly.
But that's.
And that's why Hallie has to go.
Yeah. But she's interested in that, and okay, give that a shot. There are ways you could make that interesting. I think that removing the context is fatal, but.
This is a basic truth you have to confront periodically in film criticism or thinking about movies, is that just because you're able to discern purpose and directorial intention, but is it any good?
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
And I think that's the situation we have here.
I was saying, what's prompting me
What
this
does
is
it accomplish?
there's an interesting there's an interesting take on it by Angelica Jade Bastian, saying that this entire bell jar thing you're talking about is actually, as a black woman in the South, the best portrait she's ever seen of Southern women, because that is the Southern woman. This hut house, isolated, divorced from anything, still clinging to the past thing. I don't agree with her. I don't think the film works on that
Not
level.
having met every single Southern woman, that seems to me an incredible generalization.
Well, okay. I mean, all I'm saying is that you said, what does it serve to purpose? That there is something that somebody had an interesting take on. I do think, for instance, as we're going along, the portrait of Elle Fanning in this film is just, not because she's sexually awakening, just the way she doesn't do the labor when they're in the fields, and all the younger kids have adjusted to this, and she's just barely sort of plodding along. This is somebody who never had to work a day in her life.
But in fact, that's in the sequel film, and she actually says this is her work.
Yeah. But,
to Hallie.
yeah. But,
which seems to me a little more
if we're
radical.
Not, right, but again, this is the only part I'm saying, is I don't want to critique the film for not doing what Siegel did. Yeah. I want to critique the film for what it fails at. And I think that one of the things it fails at is doing anything of interest beyond indulging in its own sort of airy, sense of isolation.
I want to critique the film for having used up enough of the discussion that we should stop, because we have one of the world's great filmmakers to talk about.
So much
and
time.
We've got
yes.
just barely enough time to get started.
Yeah. We had an idea that because of the release of the silent film The Lodger, which is one of the great breakthrough films for Alfred Hitchcock, coming out on DVD, is it from Criterion? Around about this time, that it might be interesting to say something about Hitchcock that is not, here's why we love Hitchcock, this is what Hitchcock does, but perhaps to talk about this great film director, and in a way this connects with some of the things that we've been talking about, in terms of how we can keep talking about cinema as cinema and not movies as something else, movies as politics or vehicles for social justice or historical events, you can keep talking about them that way, and I think that's fine. But how can we keep talking about them as cinema? And how can we talk about that uniqueness? And how does the cinematic art speak to us through a director who's widely considered to be the quintessential filmmaker, the one whose command of film language is at this point kind of unquestioned? And I thought that would be an intriguing sort of jumping off point. And it is funny that we've actually touched on this as we've been sitting here for the last hour, because we are talking about, Kathleen, you were raising this issue of how do we keep talking about film as film when it often gets wrested away into another conversation. The reason Hitchcock, I think, is good for that is that, you know, this guy made movies about criminals and murder. How could this possibly be important? If we're supposedly you're saying movies are an art form, why aren't we talking about the important directors who are telling us about war and peace and how we solve poverty? How can we talk about our regard for Hitchcock, and how can we describe to people that it is important and that it is the art of the cinema?
I mean, I always find it really interesting that, well, for me, if you're asking for my shorthand, I side with Robin Wood and Jonathan Rosenbaum, where I think that the really fascinating thing about Hitchcock's filmography is that, yes, it's thrillers and it's manipulation and all the rest of it, that this is a cinema of near universal empathy. That the thriller machinations that Hitchcock understood, that he always had that thing about, I can make the audience want the criminal to get away with the bank heist, I can do that, was sort of his shorthand understanding for how everybody, you know, it's Renoir's, you know, everyone has their reasons, but heightened, so that you're watching a film and this is the villain and I fear the villain, and oh, that's a lovely little moment where the villain suddenly reveals how human they are and how frail they are and how their dreams affect them.
Or in that moment, the villain needs something, and we can sort of understand why, we sort of get why he needs that, and we kind of want that too, maybe.
Yeah.
Even though he's the villain.
I mean, you know, the great example is Psycho, but I think probably the classic example would have to be Notorious, where, you know, you're seeing a pair of lovers, and it's a horrible thing, and he indulges in them, and then you're left with, I don't know about most people, for myself, you're left with like, oh, what a happy ending. Oh, wait, the poor Nazi.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
With his mother.
Yeah. and the way he's able to do this time and time and time again, where, you know, the character that in any other director's films, again with the possible exception of Renoir, would be just the muscle or the goon or the mastermind or the you know, even you know, what was it, about 3 or 4 years ago, the same company put out the original Man Who Knew Too Much, which I'd seen, but I hadn't seen it in years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And I forgot that there is a beautiful moment in the final shootout where, you know, Peter Lorre is, of course, the head of the bad guys, and there is this one female assistant of his, and you have no idea they actually have a relationship until she dies. Mm-hmm. And you suddenly realize that they've been lovers this whole time. And by conveying this through pure cinematic means, there's probably is someone along the way, but I can't think of a Hitchcock speech about anyone ever saying it's like, ah, yes, I see, everyone has their motives, or isn't it ironic
we're
how...
We're all a part of the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking, Robert, in terms of how you introduced this, Hitchcock is one of the first directors I ever taught many thousands of years ago. It was a wonderful course. I remember just enjoying the hell out of it. And one of the things that I was doing was, of course, talking about women in Hitchcock. And in those days, I was able to stand up and say, Hitchcock, whatever his personal reasons, one of the themes that he has in his films is that he rapes existentially rapes and sometimes physically rapes armored blondes, women who are somehow in some way smug or walled up or impenetrable. He finds a way to penetrate them. And in so doing, he forces their self-absorbed, almost childishness to evolve into maturity. Not always, but he's pushing towards making them grow up, even as he does so with the male protagonists in his films. He's always pushing them to grow up, to get out from under the shadow of mom or whoever is shadowing them and so on. Now, the image of rape and the penetration is because, of course, his heroines get penetrated by beaks and by gaze and by actual rape in Marnie and so on. So I'm using a metaphor. I met one of the students in that class, a young woman who became a filmmaker many, many years later. And what she remembered from that class was that I advocated rape. Now, that was a shock, but I think today, how the hell would I teach Hitchcock? How would I teach Marnie and Vertigo and the films that I particularly love, Suspicion and so on, without finding myself in that mire, that morass of, I don't even know what to call it. It's kind of a communist cell of constant recrimination and self-examination and so on that has become feminist criticism. It would be lovely to get back to being able to talk about those films in the greater metaphors, in the greater topics, the larger themes. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think feminism is a great and large theme. I don't mean that. But I do think that matters of life and death, of salvation, of selling one's soul or losing one's soul, I think those are big questions that Hitchcock is always involved in. And you can't just write him off as, a guy who had problems with women. That doesn't get you anywhere. I was rereading a lecture I once gave called The Theater of Cruelty, and von Sternberg, Buñuel, and Hitchcock. And thinking, if I publish this today, I would be lynched.
Well, actually, you'd be ignored completely, because who cares about it?
Oh, I don't know. Have you read The Stranger recently?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying, I think that we have to we as film critics, thinkers, lovers of cinema, have to find a way to get over or past or transcend this reductionism.
Yeah.
You notice I haven't suggested how, because I don't know.
Right. I would say take solace from, I think, one of the honest lessons in Hitchcock cinema. This too shall pass. There's this sense that evil is never actually omnipotent in Hitchcock, however powerful it might be, because it's always human ultimately, and it always has that weakness. But the point being is that I'm sorry, that was just an ancillary thing. It's just trying to answer your own question.
I heard you.
Yeah. I think that the filmography is so vast and complex, not complicated, that people are always going to be able to find in Hitchcock what they want to find. People are always going to be able to, as you say, just boil it down. I mean, it's funny. Even in my own lifetime, I'm a person. The only contemporaneous Hitchcock film that I saw was Family Plot. It technically could have been Frenzy too, but my folks decided not to take a 3-year-old to the movie. But even in my lifetime movies,
that probably ruined you.
It might have been. I can think of 4 or 5 flips on some basic things about Hitchcock. You know, in terms of what his, you know, is he a Catholic? Is he not? Are the English films superior to the Americans, or vice versa? And I, you know, these are endlessly debatable because there is such richness there from start to finish, from alpha to omega.
But there aren't. Too frequently, we do not have close readings of movies anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about the guts of the movie. It's
Then let's talk about the guts of Hitchcock.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I did not make the mistake of advocating rape when I taught Hitchcock the first time. But I've always been grateful to him. It was in a course called Primary Film Styles. I think I've mentioned it during a previous discussion here. When the idea was to each week give them a lesson, give them an introduction to a great filmmaker, but that great filmmaker also was particularly good at doing this or doing that, at moving the camera or not moving the camera but cutting, and that would be the focus for the week officially, but we would get into talking about what that film and that filmmaker were about. And I got to Hitchcock about week number 7, I think. And I'd been showing them Eisenstein, the Potemkin, Murnau's Sunrise, and of course at the beginning D.W. Griffith, and teaching these things. And I could tell there were some people who were a little bit engaged and curious and seemed to be following along, and others I sensed were not really with it. And we came to Hitchcock, and I actually showed them both 39 Steps and North by Northwest as two different tellings of the same story, essentially. And they just went, "What?" And just you just feel the whole class just glom onto that film. And as I talked about how it opened, and this shot, and this shot, and this shot, and they could see how what was in front of them, what they were seeing on the screen, was in fact the embodiment of lucidity. It was the development of an idea. This is where the tension is coming from. It's very, and it was so lucid for them. And I just know that through many of their minds was going, you know, I wonder if all those really creaky old movies he was showing for the last 6 weeks, if he was also not bullshitting about them, because this is really terrific. And I had a similar experience when I taught a course that went through a number of films and then came to Shadow of a Doubt. It was a course about films that came out during World War II. And again, I was like, oh my God, this is so great. And that it just provided a way of retroactively lifting everything that had come before. Yeah. You know, that may have been better than I realized when I watched it. And that I think was one of the, for me, just a piece of autobiography, that's the great thing about Hitchcock. He was extremely useful in that way. But it was precisely because, yes, you looked at what was on screen, and in recognizing what was on screen, you were kind of telling the story all over again to yourself and say, oh yeah, but that's the story Hitchcock told. And I got it through the way the images were built, brought together, moved, and that's movies.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that Hitchcock is one of the, well, maybe the best director to teach film. I mean, if you're going to do a first course on film. But again, Richard, you were teaching a course called Primary Film Styles. When you think about that, the whole concept is almost non-existent now. It's, you know, it's gender, class, socioeconomic, cookie cutters, and the whole notion of a style and how the camera moves and the editing and so on. That which makes a film move or not move, it's becoming foreign to the way people talk about film. Yeah,
but again, I'm not worried. I Are you saying, therefore, it's impossible now to advocate for Hitchcock? Because I can tell you, his fame is not diminished at all. His popularity.
I'm not. But I think there's a certain way that people advocate for Hitchcock that doesn't take into consideration any close reading of what he's up to, in terms of style or in terms of some of the things that I'm most interested in.
Oh, sure.
But
well, no, because I mean, I would actually. The only thing about Hitchcock is one of those. You have a lovely phrase you've said before about the 5 fingers of. And I've always assumed he's one of those because I don't think you've ever actually run him down for me the way you talk about it. And I would say that he's in that band, and the only problem with Hitchcock is that when you get that first flush, when I finally tracked down North by Northwest. Oh my God! Hey, what's this one? There's this period where after you see a bunch of Hitchcock films, you're convinced that's the only way movies should be made. That everybody else has got it wrong. Here's exactly how you do it. There's
all you have to do is teach Hitchcock and Hawks the same quarter. You do not have that problem.
The Hitchcocko-Hawksians?
That's exactly it. That's what one did.
Do you actually remember what the first scene in the first Hitchcock film is?
No.
It's the pleasure garden. It is a rich guy hitting on a blonde chorus girl who drops it when he finds out that it's dyed hair. This guy knew what he was up to from the start.
Marnie, the beginning? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's another thing that's beautiful. I'm sorry. You haven't mentioned it. So.
I was going to say I trying to get to this something essential. When I think about North by Northwest, it's kind of my favorite movie, and I always feel like it's a film that, although it is about a guy who's caught in a spy thing, it's a movie that is about why we go to movies, because this guy is a normal person, and maybe he's got a little bit of a dull life, and something takes him off, and he's in a movie, and he likes it, and he meets a girl, and then they go off, and it's dangerous and exciting, and I think it's a film that's about watching movies, and I want to connect that to the fact that when you watch Hitchcock, every shot seems like it's been thought through. It's got these ideas in it. It's got a sense. They have a sense of play in them, of how much fun it would be to make this story happen in this way that is the movies, and that's one of the essences of art, of making art, of the impulse to create something is that it's inextricable from being alive and from creating life
and play
and playing in it. Yeah. And Hitchcock said, most movies are slices of life, mine are slices of cake, and that's what you feel like when you're watching these confections.
But he storyboarded.
And he storyboarded.
Yeah.
And there are people, even now I read like other filmmakers who will say, oh yeah, I heard Hitchcock storyboard. That's why his movies always don't look, they're not,
but this
they're
is
dead or something.
We are all large, we all contain multitudes. This is one of these things. Yes, we all know that Hitchcock was this storyboarding fanatic, that he, yet he always claimed Shadow of His Doubt was his favorite shoot, which was location and who can trust the light and everything like that. We all know that Hitchcock wanted everything perfectly nailed down. Bruce Stern, Martin Balsam, tons of actors have always said he'd let you improvise to your heart's desire if your head was at the right angle in the frame. That he knew what he needed visually, but he actually didn't. Whereas, some more like colic presence like a Paul Newman, who I think was a terrific actor, never understood that, and so he thought like, oh, he just treats us like cattle. No. This is an act. All throughout his career, you can tell he delights in actors, but by the same token, he doesn't want to just follow them around like, say, an Altman, whom I love as well. He wants them to hit that. They have to hit the mark. Oh yeah. They have to hit the mark because he's going to edit to the other thing.
Everything depends on that.
I don't think he loved Tippi Hedren. I really don't.
No, I remember talking about
I'll give you that.
Newman in Torn Curtain. He talks about this in his interview with the book-length interview with Truffaut, that there was a scene we did not see that involved Newman playing opposite the actor who played Gromek, the East German thug cop who liked life in America and so forth, and who Newman has helped kill.
Yeah.
And now he meets his twin brother when he goes to tour a factory or something like that, and the guy's supposed to sit and talk about, this is the way we make sausage here. This is really good sausage. You know, they're having lunch together, and Newman is sitting there, eaten up by guilt because he killed this guy's brother, and he couldn't stop playing it, playing a guilty Paul Newman. And Hitchcock just said, I just want you to sit there so I can shoot your profile. And this other guy's playing the scene, and we're going to just cut to you. And you should be doing nothing, thinking nothing. And Newman couldn't do it. He couldn't stop being Paul Newman, and Hitchcock ended up throwing out the scene because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't cut the way he needed to cut. It wasn't worth doing. So it is, again, that mystery of the movies. I suppose it goes back to the Kuleshov experiment with Muzhikine and the same expression, but depending what you intercut it with it. Oh my God, he's so stricken by sorrow. Oh God, you can see how hungry it is. He wants that bowl of soup. And Hitchcock knew how to put those pieces together and create a powerful, seductive reality, which in fact existed in no other way.
It's so incredible that he could conceive of space like that, and how he wanted images, that is, people, to be in the space and the frame and so on, with that forethought. And yet his movies are never airless.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of The Beguiled again. I mean, there's just no sense at all that there is anything but dangerous play in his seeing.
Speaking of the airless things in these movies, one of the things that I love in The Lodger is that your awareness of the London night going on outside the apartment, the building that is the principal location in the film. Just every once in a while, this errant reflections of traffic will go across the ceiling.
And yet there's almost nothing out there.
Yeah.
I mean, he will show somebody standing by a lamppost, and there's a sense of maybe there's a bridge or something there, but there's almost nothing in the film except the boarding house.
Yeah.
And that early shot through the streets, that process shot of, you know, the car going through the streets and so on. But I was amazed at how bare it was.
I mean, you know, because I doubt this was one of those examples, but another one of the interesting things about Hitchcock that I think is under discussed sometimes is this is a man who was like so supremely confident in his skill and talent that every once in a while he would just like toss himself a challenge. I'm going to set a whole movie on a lifeboat. I'm going to make it look, it's not actually one unbreaking take. It's deliberately done as 4 takes. But in other words, you know, I'm going to make a movie that just feels like unbroken takes.
Rope.
Yes, exactly. You know, and the way he always would set himself these challenges was, I mean, there's never that kind of brilliant arrogance about it that you get from like a young Wells or say Brian De Palma, both of whom I love inordinately. But both of whom want you very much to realize, like, oh, you just worked this out, so the camera went over the thing. Whereas in Hitchcock, it is so wedded to emotion, particularly, but also narrative, because he's telling you this story and you're going along, that even as somebody who's really sensitive to film, a lot of times for me, it will be the second, third, fourth time that I suddenly realize it's like, oh, this camera just went up the stairs. Mm-hmm. You know, you're so engaged in the performance of the actors and following them through this space, you don't even realize how dynamically constructed this motion has been. You know, there's the famous one, going back to Notorious, just because I haven't seen it recently, but it's a good touchstone. That shot of the key in Bergman's hand, which is this famous, you know, if you this cringe, it just goes on forever, and he finds this key, and you know, even when you're like, oh, that's a neat crane shot, then you realize this is 1946. He had to have the greatest camera technicians to pull off this shot without screwing up the focus from this, you know, going all the way up to a literal close-up of a key in a hand. Everyone always talks about his technical fluency. Who cares? The fact is he knew how to make any shot possible, and that is what, and he wanted to engage you emotionally. You know, there's a thing in Hitchcock interviews where he's always so pragmatic about failures. Like his failures are always like, oh, this actually lost money, so it didn't work, the experiment. But when he's actually talking about him, you can tell that aesthetically he's actually not that disappointed. He just he felt he missed the public's pulse, and it's therefore a failure.
That's something, you know, that I think you need to say in the context of Hitchcock, or at least you have to ask the question, how did Hitchcock, if he ever turned around and looked into the dark, how do you think he rated his auditors, his witnesses to his talent?
The Icebox crew, or not? What is it? The Icebox. What's the phrase? The Icebox crowd. Yeah, he talked about how, like, you know, he liked audiences, but then he would always hate losing it to the Icebox crowd, which were the people that saw the movie, enjoyed it. They'd go home, they'd take the chicken out of the icebox. It's like, how was the movie? It's like, it was okay, but you know, this part didn't really make any sense. And this part didn't make any sense. So I don't care about that. I want you to enjoy it at the time.
He cared about the audience insofar as he was a master manipulator of the audience.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes it's almost terrifying how easily he does that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would like sometime to talk more about talent like that and a vision, I mean, like eyes that can see like that, but also at the same time have such a sense of how to galvanize the parts of us that he wants to galvanize. I mean, I think that's fascinating. I don't know of another director who's like that.
Yeah.
I mean, who literally knows precisely what will set us off.
I mean, I think Spielberg comes closest.
I was going to say Spielberg when he's at his best, yeah.
But
I mean,
but I don't feel that Spielberg is an unfriendly manipulator. I think he's, for the most part, a benign manipulator. He knows how to move you. Okay.
well, Jaws. No, I mean,
but that's not you know, heavy duty stuff. It's a shark. You know, it's not the same as Devlin in Notorious.
yeah, no.
You know, and I think, well, I don't think that manipulation. I think it's full of contempt. I really do.
So I think
And that's not a criticism.
no, I understand that. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just saying I think there's a fair amount of criticism and contempt for large numbers of people who can be manipulated, as they are in his films.
I was gonna say, in part, I feel like he was so good at that because he was aware of his own fears and anxieties and weaknesses. So
I
it's
never thought he was particularly comfortable with them.
No. I know. I think he was still afraid.
Yes.
At the very end, without a question.
That's a good point to make at the very end.
At the very end,
I
yes.
think we're past
We do
our,
have to wrap
our
it up.
limit,
We'll
unfortunately.
pick these up questions
We're just
up.
getting started on now.
I know. We
yes.
should have started with Hitchcock.
Maybe next time we'll pick it up from there. So thank you all for coming, and I hope we can see you again. Thank you.